Welcome to Talking Maine with a Bowtie Boy. I'm Tom Saviello, and we're going to talk about climate change. I have my good friend Cynthia. Cynthia, welcome back. You're a multiple-time offender of coming on this show.
I am, and I've been missing it. I can't believe we didn't get to do it last year.
Yeah, well, we've done a lot of things together. Very diverse, if I think about it. We've done all kinds of stuff, from cooking to fiddleheads, and we're going to talk about carbon right now. But before we do that, just as a disclaimer, this is an issue that will be in front of some of the town meetings. This station is not taking a side on this issue, but I have not heard from anybody on the other side that wants to come and talk, and Cynthia has approached me very kindly and asked for some time, and we felt it was appropriate. So I just want to make sure that everybody's clear with that. So Cynthia, tell us how you've gotten involved in this whole thing.
So this whole thing is, Tom, sort of a citizen's response to concerns about how are we going to change our course on climate disruption, right? So there's a citizens climate lobby, which is a national volunteer organization with like 10,000 volunteers all over the country working on climate solutions. And one of their favorites is this carbon fee and dividend, which is where we finally price fossil fuels to reflect their actual cost to society and to our economy, and then take all of the fees that are charged to raise the prices of fossil fuels and give them back to the American people in an equitable fashion. And so I just thought this was a great way to do something positive, because this Citizens Climate Lobby is nonpartisan, it's very respectful in its dialogues, and it's generated a lot of bipartisan support for this kind of thinking. And we thought, what better way to spread the word than bring it to town meeting?
I think it's a great idea. I know that Peter Campion approached us in Wilton, and I felt very strongly this needs to be a town decision, not a select decision. And so to bring it to the town, and I know you're going to bring that to the town in Farmington and others that have town meetings. Some have unfortunately have done away with the town meetings, at least for this year. So I think it's a great idea. I mean, personally, I want to be clear. I do believe climate change is taking place. And I do what I can personally to minimize my imprint on the environment. But there are others that aren't as fortunate that can do that or don't understand what's going on. And I think that's really important, your opportunity to educate.
You've made a really good point, too. There's so many conscientious people who are doing what they can, with their recycling and everything else. But if everybody does a little bit gets done, basically. Climate disruption is such a large problem that it's very much out of most people's control, and there's a feeling of being out of control, and some big policies are necessary to go along with all the other little stuff. And that's why it's been really instructive for me personally to be able to look at this really cool model that MIT has developed to test different effects of different possible policy alternatives. Personally, I'd love to do all the plant trees stuff. I mean, I would love to grow seaweed. I want to, make restorative agriculture be the linchpin of it. But that's why this model is great, because it shows you what varying effects can be. And and
we're going to go to that model in a minute. Now, right now, what towns do you plan to go to? I know Wilton's one, and I know Farmington's one. What is the other ones that are?
Okay, so they're all around the state, really, but
yes.
We've got sort of a concentration over here because there's a really conscientious community that everybody knows each other around here. So we were able to get articles on there. We found town champions for Vienna, Starks, Chesterville, that's me, not New Sharon, Temple, Farmington, Wilton. I think that's it for the area.
That's still pretty good.
Yeah, Vienna already voted on it and passed it without a problem. Chesterville voted against it with, more opposition than support, but it sort of was a matter of understanding, basically, because it's been very hard in the pandemic to get word out about anything. But Farmington is coming up, as is Temple.
And we're not until June, I believe.
No, they're both in April.
Yes.
And then Wilton is what, in
I think it's going to be June right now.
June? Yeah, and Mount Vernon is also in June.
So that's good you've gotten some word out. And so I think before we get to Peter, just briefly, what does the law do? And then we'll tune in Peter, and then we'll come back to how the law is going to work.
Okay, so basically it's targeting the law, carbon pricing in general, targets the notion of there being a market failure, basically, in our market economic system. And a bunch of conservative economists decided this, saying that carbon fuels were not priced correctly. And so putting a fee on carbon means basically taxing. We don't want to call it a tax because we don't believe it's a tax. But anyway, carbon emissions that are the potential from any given fossil fuel. And that way, exerting a strong market signal to phase out those fossil fuels and phase in renewables. Basically, the response should be coming from industry and manufacturing, the hugest users of fossil fuels. Then, in order to avoid the regressive effect of what a tax would be on low-income people, we take all of that revenue from the fees and distribute it to every American household, equal amounts to each person on a regular basis. Monthly is what the Energy and Innovation Act has, but I've seen quarterly as well. But anyway, and then have that dividend continually come into households so that they can use it to balance their household budgets.
Great. Well, why don't we do this? Let's go to Peter. He's got the model that we've just talked about, and have him talk. He and I talk about that a little bit, and then we'll come back again and talk a little bit more about what's going to happen in front of the towns and so forth. That was great.
Perfect.
All right, Peter, we're coming to see you.
So, Peter, tell me, you've got some things you can help in the conversation that Cynthia and I are having about climate change.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to bring these. So this is I've been accredited for a model that has now free to use and open online called En-ROADS. En-ROADS is the product of MIT, a little school set to the south of us. They do pretty good work down there. And they've got this. Yeah, they're all right. They've got this thing called En-ROADS, which is a product of the Sloan School of Management and their nonprofit division dedicated towards climate education. And before I show it to you, there's the thing that's interesting about it is that 5 years ago, they created a product called C-ROADS, which was apparently the crucial tool used in Paris in 2015 to negotiate where different levels of carbon dioxide needs to be. It's kind of a more primitive tool. En-ROADS is a lot more policy specific, so we can actually kind of model what a particular policy will do in En-ROADS, and it'll spit out exactly how much temperature increase we'll expect and that kind of stuff. So let me show it to you. Yeah, you'll check this out. So are you seeing what I'm seeing now?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of graphs, energy efficiency is
Cool. All right. So this is it. So this is exactly what it looks like when you bring it up. I've actually calibrated a bit differently so that this is showing temperature increases on the right. That's what we're most concerned with. So 20 years ago we were down here, and now we're about here. We're pushing up against this dotted line at 1.5 degrees. This is degrees in Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So that's before the industrial revolution. So we were already at about like 0.8 or 9 or something down here, and we were getting to like 1.3 or 4 at this point, and we're expected to blow by that dotted line. And the dotted lines are the recommended levels to stay below according to the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So
when you say, Peter, when you say stay below, that means if we stay below the 2, we aren't going to see perhaps the catastrophic impacts that might be if the temperature increases significantly.
Exactly, right, exactly. So I think really what they're talking about, 1.5 was their original recommendations, Tom, and they said stay below this because after this we don't know what kind of feedback loops which we're not going to control anymore, like permafrost thawing in the Arctic and releasing methane, that kind of stuff. Then they said, well, maybe since it looks like we're going to blow past 1.5, maybe we'll be okay if we stay below 2. But you can see that this model will show how challenging that task is. And if we don't do anything, if we stay on the course the world is on right now, we end up way out here at the end of 2100. On the left, this is kind of interesting, is where all of the different energy points are. So like this is where we're grabbing our energy from. The black line is coal, or brown line, I guess. red is oil, natural gas is the dark blue, renewables is green. We see that kind of shooting up here. Bioenergy, which is burning parts of the bio, basically wood fuel and that kind of stuff. Yep, wood pellets and that sort of thing is this pink line. Nuclear down here is the light blue. And then they have a catch-all that's kind of baseline 0, which is in case this is just a category, in case something comes up we don't know about, like nuclear fusion or vibranium or the flux capacitor or something like that. So, and then we can actually profile all of these different kinds of energy things. So for instance, with coal, any one of these sliders can be like a macro level where I'm just kind of incentivizing or disincentivizing any of these kinds of 8 fuel or energy source profiles. Or I could also kind of do a deeper dive. Any one of these, see these 3 dots here, Tom, I can click on those. And it shows you like a much deeper interaction with it. I can get much more specific about it.
Oh, I got you. So if we increase renewables by giving more subsidies to get more into place, it would have an impact. I just saw that on there. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it builds from the thing I like about it. It's not like waving a magic wand and renewables come into existence. It's incentivizing through markets. It's really an economics based model more than it's got over 1,600 different compatible equations all working at the same time to kind of do this. And it's constantly being refreshed from the latest data from the scientific and economic community. So we can do all those different things for our fuel sources, or we can change the demand on all these other ones, which is transportation, either making it more energy efficient or electrifying our vehicle fleets. Buildings and industry, the same thing, energy efficiency and electrification. Economic and population growth, as much as we can control that, right? Land use, which is either the deforestation, which is the rate in which we're cutting down the world's forests, and then methane and other sources of greenhouse gas emissions, which is coming from farming and from natural gas line pipe leaks and that kind of stuff. And then carbon removal, which is either natural means by planting lots of trees or technologically. And technologically can be all kinds of different categories. This can be like, I'll just go cruise through this a little bit so you can see, but it's sluggish here. Yeah. So if you go through, you can see that we have either bioenergy capture, carbon capture and storage, which is like basically planting algae and genetically engineering them so that they could capture more carbon, which is a field of research. Or direct air capture is like a machine that they work on in Europe that's not cost effective at all. Or mineralization, or agricultural soil sequestration, which is changing farming practices, which has got a lot of potential. Biochar is something very similar to that too. So all of these things are kind of fascinating, but this just gives you an idea. And what I would do is when I bring these to different folks, we bring this all around folks all over Maine and kind of internationally, is ask them to offer some ideas about what they hear kind of spoken about as like a climate solution or part of the solution, and see its impacts on temperature increases.
Can you just look at the afforestation one?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So I could click on this and talk about this. Any one of these things, we can talk about the year it starts or all that, and I can read up. Any one of these gives me some information I should tell you, just talking about like, well, where are we going to get this land to plant these trees and all that stuff. So, but if I just grab this as just a like kind of general trend, we're highly incentivizing afforestation. That's going to be a big policy. And I should say this model is worldwide. We're looking at overall the whole world. Grab this, move it way over. You can see nothing changed as far as where energy comes from, right? But that makes sense. We're not changing where this is just talking about sucking up some of the carbon that's in the atmosphere. And you can see that there's a slight deviation between the scenario we've just plotted and the baseline, like business as usual, but not that, not the extent we're hoping for, not what we need. Let's put it that way.
I only asked you, Peter, you know my background, but I have a PhD in forest resources and a lot of work in forest soils. So those are the ones that personally interest me. Yeah,
wonderful. Well, it's nothing, every step in the right direction is important. It's just a matter of like, how did we're kind of like well past the point where it's like any one solution will get us.
Right. So Peter, what are the big movers then? What really makes the big difference in breaking that curve off?
Let me go through a couple three, and then show you some of our favorites. So in Maine, we talk a lot about tailpipes and like a big switch towards electric vehicles, which is great. That's part of like, the governor's climate council and the great work they're doing. But so I could grab that and just talk about incentivize electric vehicles. Now, remember, we're on a worldwide model here, so you have to think about it outside just Maine. But in Maine, that may be really good. And when I move this, I can see that green line goes up, which is exactly what we want to have happen. And we can see the red line goes down, which means oil consumption goes down. But check this out. It's kind of got a disappointing reaction over here on the temperature.
Yeah,
and a lot of that has to do because of what's going on with coal. If we're talking Maine, we're blessed in Maine to have a lot of renewables in our energy portfolio and low carbon. We're pretty green on our grid comparatively. But if you look at it compared to other parts of the world, coal is a big contributor to their electric. And if we only incentivize electric vehicles, coal actually continues to go up. Case in point, last year when Australia was having its record wildfires, they still had their number one export was coal. So
interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, good for Maine, but we don't want, maybe not for the whole world, right? So then we can talk other things. We could talk about, well, let's just happens if we like really bump up renewables, highly incentivize renewables. And that does quite a bit. We can move that all the way over and check that out. Boom. We like that. Renewables goes up, and it made a bigger impact over here on the right. Now, again, it's this is a sobering model because it shows you how steep it is for us to get to where we want.
Peter, I'm beginning to think I better plant apricots.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Or bananas.
Yeah. Well, I promise you I will end with some hopeful news.
Okay, all right, that's good.
Here that the renewables goes up, but the problem is that we're just incentivizing the good stuff, Tom, and not disincentivizing the bad stuff. So you can see coal goes down mid-century because it starts losing market share to these cheaper incentivized renewables. Problem is that once it kind of hits rock bottom prices, it starts bouncing back up again. It's got like an economic rebound effect where it's like people, because coal particularly is so dirty and so plentiful, it's the most plentiful fossil fuel. That's the one we're most concerned with. All right, I've shown you enough sad stuff. Let me talk to you about the one that people aren't talking about that I think is the reason why I'm really excited about this model is on carbon pricing. So you can see that we didn't get very close to where we wanted to, that 2 degrees with any of these other things. But there's a number of different bills that have not been talked about very much. But there's the one with the most co-signatories in the U.S. Congress, and it's bipartisan. It has some Republican support. Starts with a $15 price on carbon that can be implemented within the first year because it just applies it on the point of either the fracking site or the refinery or the coal mine or the port of entry. And it goes up every year starting this year. Let's be optimistic and say it could be passed, and then goes up for the next 80 years because that's how far the model goes out. It goes up until we reach a certain level of reductions, but it goes up every year by $10 a year. So $15 on a ton of carbon is equivalent, Tom, to about 12 cents on a gallon of gas. So we know we've seen fluctuations like that, but it goes up every year. So that it sends a price signal across the entire economy saying this is predictable and persistent. And so $10 a year for the 80 years, that's $800 plus the initial 15. So you can see that gradually increasing price on carbon. And because it alone works economy wide, you can see that yes, it doesn't get us all the way down to that magic number of 2, but it does well more than anything else because we're not playing whack-a-mole. We're not watching carbon emissions come up in other spots. If I can show you, keep going.
Yeah, while you're going to do that, but basically what you're saying is it's got to be a combination of maybe the increased fee on carbon as well as some of the other activities out there.
Right. So there's a lot of good work happening, but we're kind of like patching old inner tube right now instead of actually trying to do something that's the one thing that's carbon pricing works is it's economy wide. Now I know what everyone's probably thinking who's watching this, and the first time I heard this was that's going to hurt working class people, low income folks, because they're the ones paycheck to paycheck living. But that's why most of these models, including the Republican-backed ones and the bipartisan-backed bills, turn that money back into a dividend check every month. It's the same process that's worked in Canada really successfully. It actually helps the poorer people because they're the ones, even though they may be driving like gas guzzlers or something, most of that carbon is coming from embedded sources. It's stuff that's going into the clothes I make, or like stuff that I don't even know that's got carbon associated with it. It's just the product line gets to me that way. And I can see that once I put you can see now I'm looking at where my energy is coming from, or where the emissions are coming from. If I actually move methane down, that's through like some sort of regulatory process, and then talked about your afforestation or your some sort of carbon removal from the
Peter,
direct energy
I
capture.
gotta start. This is fantastic. Is this model available for anybody to go in and play with?
Yeah, and just so you know, like there's some other stuff out there that you have to pay like a 40 grand tuition to use. MIT has made this free to use by anybody. Now, you get some surprising results, and I'm just giving you a Reader's Digest back of the envelope version of this. But yes, if you go to this website, you can see it. Energy Innovation.
Okay, so we'll find the website and post it, but I got to go back to Cynthia. She's over here snoring, and I got to wake her up and get her back going again. So Peter, this is fantastic. I may get in touch with you myself personally to talk about this later on, but this is great thing. Let me bye. And flip into Cynthia. Cynthia, wake up, we're coming back.
Hey, we're back. Cynthia's awake. Thanks, Cynthia. That was great to get Peter to come on like that. He is a very smart man, and that model's phenomenal. Those that were watching that part, if you want to go and actually try the model yourself, we're running it right underneath here for the website. And please go there, because I intend to go play with that a little bit and see what I can learn. One of the things I loved about it did have soils in there as one of the things. So I need to go play with that, because years ago, when I was in the legislature, I actually put that bill in.
Wow.
And I got nobody interested. So I actually killed it. I put it in. It's back in again this year. Someone else has actually put it in for
there's the healthy soils.
Oh, and somebody has put the bill in.
Pending right now, yeah.
So Cynthia, there is a similar model that I've seen on the Facebook site that people can use. How does that model work?
Are you talking about the carbon calculator?
Yes, the carbon calculator.
Okay, yeah, sure. Citizens Climate Lobby has this vast website that is advocating on behalf of this policy. And one of the things that they felt would be really important is to let people see what hypothetically the impact might be on their household finances to have this fee and dividend thing in place. And so the carbon calculator is something that you can just go to, and it asks for your household living situation, like how many people in your household, it's very important, how much you spend on various energy things, and how many miles you drive, and things like that. And they make certain assumptions about price of gas, I guess, and about all the conditions in our economy to spit out in the end what would happen to you on a monthly basis. What would you see? Would you, if the first year of it's only for the first year of the policy, when $15 per ton of carbon dioxide emissions is the charge, how would that affect your income? And so for most people, like 60%, and a big, very exhaustive studies have been done on this, 60% of American households would either break even or come out ahead by virtue of the monthly dividend, given all the projected possible price increases, and given the income tax bracket that might, however it affects your income for the purposes of income tax, what would be the effect? And for almost everybody that I've punched in, and examples that Tom has given me of people that he might know, show that people have a slight advantage every month overall. They don't lose money, in other words. The worst loss I've seen is a single person living in a household that burns an inordinate amount of oil and so on, will lose like $1 or $2 a month. So I'm pretty confident that even though intuitively I was really worried, Tom, about how people around here have to drive really far, and they have to drive old vehicles and four-wheel drive vehicles, and but it doesn't seem to actually have the negative impact, and that's because it really affects mostly people with the most income. So the top 30% are going to make, they only are going to see a small
So even though they get
loss
that,
too.
so I think I'm beginning to understand this a little bit better as we've talked, is that I'm going to be guaranteed an income that's going to come back to me, or a rebate, or whatever you want to call it. It's going to come back to me, and that's going to match up to what I spent. So if I minimize my spending here, I'm going to be break even or better.
Right.
If I spend a lot, which we think people with higher incomes are going to do, they're still going to get the same dividend, but they're not going to make up for the difference. So they might have a. So now it actually just dawned on me. So give me a break.
Yeah, so it's no longer allowed to be called regressive that way.
That's-
Because,
yeah.
whereas carbon tax, people all over the world say carbon tax, that's regressive. And I'm saying liberals are some of the worst people to deal with on this right now, because they're like, no, carbon taxes are regressive. Did you hear me say dividend?
Yeah.
I
mean, that's the part, as you and I have talked, is you got to try to sell, is there are those that say if it's a fee, it smells like a tax, it looks like a tax, it tastes like a tax, it is a tax. I've been through but I think you talk about dividend is a better way to do it.
Right,
than the
and
fee.
besides, I looked up the definition of tax in various sources, Wikipedia, Investopedia, blah, blah, blah. A tax is something that the government charges you and for its own uses. This is not going to be used by the government. It's the bill that we're behind, and the reason we're behind a specific bill is because what's a policy idea? Who cares? But there is one bill that does actually, it's set up that says, this bill is to establish a carbon trust fund for the American people to incentivize the shift to renewables or whatever and help them in the process. And so it's targeted specifically to go back to people.
And that's when we talked about, I think at the federal level, I don't have the answer. In Maine, I can tell you that the only places in the Constitution where you can set up whatever you want, they've been known to steal it. But that's not this is not at the state level. This is at the federal level. So I don't understand.
Right.
Something you want to make sure.
My understanding is that if you pass it as a law, that it's a
have to
trust
follow.
fund, then you'd have to pass another law to overthrow that.
Yeah,
And,
so
I mean,
and that may be well true. So I just
if you believe that we enforce laws in this country that's supposedly based on the rule of law,
I would hope so. But who are they going to arrest? I don't know.
I
Cynthia,
see
so
they
we're getting
don't
close to
arrest.
the end. What words would you like to leave with those that are going to go to those town meetings that watch this show, that they think about when they go in to make that decision?
Yeah, I think that the most important point right now for us is that we see carbon pricing is actually getting a lot of air these days. And in the last congressional session, there were no less than 10 bills for carbon pricing. And this was the only one that actually specified that all the money goes back to households.
yeah.
The rest of them would be classified as a tax because they're for some new kinds of programs or more funding of regulations. There could be really good programs that they're funding, but they aren't necessarily going to get to Maine.
Right.
They're not going to get to maybe low-income people or anybody else that we know. So we like this one. So that's why we're saying send to Congress a signal that you are aware that there is an option that says the money goes back to people. If you're going to be doing carbon pricing, this is the one we want.
That is a perfect message, because if we're going to do it, you need to send it back to us and not use it at the federal level for something else.
Precisely.
Perfect.
You
way
get
to-
it.
Perfect. Cynthia, as always, it is a pleasure to have you on the show, and maybe we'll do another mushroom show.
Yeah, and hopefully next year the Fiddlehead Festival.
All right, we're good. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Talking Maine. Be sure you go to your town meeting and vote one way or the other, but do it. All right, see you next time. Bye-bye.